I'll say for Thea, honestly, honest to God, we didn't do one short approach triple jump the Olympic year. Like, seriously. She doesn't like doing short approach jumps, honestly.
Today I'm joined by Aaron Gadson, the coach behind Olympic triple jump champion Thea LaFond. We go in depth on the bold changes that led to her gold medal. From technical shifts to how she trained differently than most elite jumpers. Whether you're a coach or an athlete, this one is packed with lessons that you can apply right now. Let's jump into it. So, Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into coaching and a little bit of your story getting into the track?
Cool. So, my story is, I did, track myself, in high school. I was a primarily long jumper and triple jumper, but I also did hurdles and relays and things like that. So I actually got recruited as a multi at some places. But I ended up doing just long and triple jump in college. I was like a pretty good jumper, I guess. I mean, now things have kind of evolved. People are a lot better. But, I jumped good enough to qualify for regionals or the first round of NCAAs. I think that's what they call it now. But when I was there, we had two guys that were NCAA champions, so Division One NCAA champions, so guys that I trained with every day. And so, I think I had a lot of frustration where I felt like, why can't I kind of beat up on these guys in practice? But when it came to meets, they were just killing me. And so kind of through that process, after college, I competed or tried to compete for a little bit more. And that's kind of how I started coaching, because in my area, I'm in the Northeast, and as you know, Northeast gets cold. And so, you need some place to train for the winter. And so one of the schools, the private schools, had an indoor facility, and to use their indoor facility, they wanted me to help them coach. And so I was coaching high school kids and stuff like that as I was training. And then, unfortunately, while I was training, I ended up getting a big knee injury that's like pretty much career-ending kind of knee injury. And so then I kind of was stuck with, well, not stuck with coaching. Actually, I ended up liking coaching more than I expected, just because I think it helped give kids, like, there's a ton of kids in high school in particular that just don't have coaches, and they're really just doing their own thing. And, fortunately for, pages like you and resources and like social media, kids have a little bit more than they did, even 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But again, a lot of kids didn't have the opportunity to even have a coach tell them what to do. And so I think through coaching, I just felt like there was a lot of kids that were missing out on opportunities, and I was able to kind of give a lot of kids with a lot of talent opportunities to get, scholarships or to go to college and things like that. And so I think really resonated with me being a coach and being able to see the development of kids, particularly in high school. And like I said, give them those opportunities. So that's kind of how I started coaching. And then I think it's just over time, as, I got some kids who had no business, going to the state meet, end up winning the state meet. And then I got some All-Americans and, Gatorade players and things like that. It kind of snowballed and just getting better and better athletes. And eventually that's kind of how I connected with Thea, and then I got her better and better, and then she got a gold medal, and so the rest is history.
So you started out training high school jumpers. So what are some differences you think in terms of training high school jumpers, college jumpers, and just jumpers at different levels of experience?
I mean, honestly, I think that, all of those levels have similar problems. I mean, there's some more problems that are more prevalent at different levels than others. Like at the professional level, you're not going to have to really deal as much with, let's say, like, motivation and like teaching kids how to be disciplined and like teaching them actually like how to, what certain, drills are and things like that. So somebody who's pro is probably going to have a really good kind of background as far as actually knowing how to do all the stuff. They know the lingo or whatever, but they still might foul a lot. High school kids foul a lot too. College kids foul a lot too. And so like, I think that's a problem that's, across the board. But to answer your question more directly, I think, high school kids, you're just getting them to learn how to train. Like they have to be able to, survive practices and get fit enough to actually be able to jump and not have shin splints and stuff like that. They have to learn how to lift. They have to, there's a lot of learning that goes on in those earlier levels. I think as you become, more experienced, you go from just like actually getting through the workouts and learning how to be kind of more intentful about what you're doing and, continually improving like the details of, what I'm saying, the details as far as like the technical stuff, the details as far as like getting enough sleep, eating right, recovery, and all those things. And so I think as the higher level you get, those type of details become more and more important because the difference between, an Olympic champion and, making the Olympics might only be like 3%, and so I think in high school, you can get in 1 year, you could get a 10% increase. And that's like unheard of really at the professional level. And that 10% increase could come from puberty. 10% increase could come from you've never ran before and now you have ran, or you've never lifted before and now you have lifted. And so I think those are the main things. But again, I think people would maybe be surprised that there are tons of pro athletes that have the same problems that high school kids have. And so, as a coach, I think it's really important to kind of learn, maybe even start your career, coaching high school and stuff, even if you were a professional athlete or whatever, because you learn how to kind of solve any problem. And when you can learn how to solve any problem, I think it helps you become really creative and really good at the professional level and collegiate level. Because I think there's some coaches at the collegiate level and beyond that are just, they're just like hoarding talent and recruiting athletes, but they're not necessarily making like a lot of big like technical changes. And I think the reason why Thea, for example, was really successful, because if you look at her, in Rio Olympics compared to Paris Olympics, she literally looks like a different person. And I don't think you can say that for a lot of people.
Yeah, that change between the Rio Olympics and the Tokyo Olympics and Paris Olympics is really pronounced. So I know that one very interesting thing that you have done with her is that you use a double arm action in the triple jump, whereas most female athletes use a single arm action or some derivation of that. So what is your thought process behind, it's kind of a different coaching philosophy. What was your thought process behind that? And what do you think of the role of the arm action in general?
Well, I mean, when I was a jumper, I was double arm. And I think obviously I'm a male, and most of the males I trained with the double arm. I guess I would say the females were probably single arm too. I don't totally remember. But I always thought double arm was like, it just felt more comfortable. It just seemed better. And, when Thea came to me, she was single arm, but she asked me the day, like when we were, I don't even want to call it an interview, but it's like informal kind of interview about like, should we work together? Should we not work together? She wanted to double arm. And she said that, her previous coach kind of laughed at her about double arming. And, my experience up until that point was like, I had high school girls that were jumping 36 feet double arming. And so I didn't see why there's any reason why any girl couldn't do double arm, assuming that they technically, like they could like, from a coordination standpoint, do it. There's no research that I've seen anywhere that actually has any scientific, physiological, anthropometric reason why women shouldn't be able to double arm. And so I'm like, hey, let's do it. Like, it makes sense to me. And so I think, beyond just that anecdotal evidence of just kind of what I saw with like high school girls that didn't jump particularly far, still double arming and doing well, I think that what I see with single arm, particularly with women, is that to me, it throws them off balance. And I would say the vast majority of women, even at the elite level, don't have a very good, middle phase. And I think that's largely because of what they're doing with their arm, their single arm, and it's really throwing them off balance and getting them twisted. And I don't know why, if, pretty much all the best men double arm, why wouldn't we want women to double arm? And if the vast majority of college boys are double arming, then why can't elite women double arm? They're just as fast and just as strong. You have women jumping 15 meters. Why are all the high school boys that are jumping 47 feet double arming? Like the argument, I think if to be consistent in the argument, you'd say like, okay, well, if women aren't strong enough to double arm, okay, so then why are all these high school boys double arming? Like, that doesn't logically make any sense.
It's a very fair point. It makes sense. You said that sometimes it can throw, like the single arm action can throw elite female jumpers off balance. So do you feel like there's a time and a place for the single arm, like where some people might be able to utilize it more effectively than others? And like, how would you be able to parse out what an individual jumper should use?
Yeah, I'm not anti single arm. I think single arm can be good. Let me say this. I think when running to the board, I think single arm is probably better. It's better from the standpoint of it helps you maintain speed through the board. And I think what a lot of people do, particularly, I'll I want to say particularly high school kids, but maybe not particularly high school kids. I think a lot of people, when they double arm, they come to the board and they do this like gather motion. And so that they come like this, then they bring their arms back, and then they go like this and take off. And even Christian Taylor does that. You know, he jumps super duper far, right? I don't think you should do that for a couple reasons. Well, one, you lose speed. Even Christian Taylor loses speed when he does that, but he does it in a way that's pretty responsible, I think. And he's also super duper fast. He might even be too fast for his triple jump, right? And so I don't think a lot of people have that problem. Okay. But what you see, what happens a lot is that people, the reason why they're doing that gather is because people are trying to, like I say, like kill the takeoff. And so what I mean by that is like they'll do this gather and then they'll really like drop into that last step. They'll get really low, bring those arms really far back. Their chest is going to drop. And then they're going to try to like really like jump off of the board. And that's might make you have like a big hop or a high hop, but you're going to get killed in the next phase. You're going to pay for it. And so, I mean, that's a big tangent, but like, you know, I think that that's definitely one way that, you know, double arm can kind of get you messed up if you're doing that. But, you know, you're asking me kind of why, you know, when would single arm be good? I think, again, I think single arm is fine. I think there's a couple of good examples like Rugi Diallo from France. I think she's like really a really good single arm example. You know, she jumped 14 world juniors in, what was that, 2014, I believe. Yeah, I think in 2014 she jumped 1440. Now, I mean, as a professional, she jumped 1450 something, maybe 56. But I think she's like a beautiful single arm jumper, and I think she's really good at just being able to maintain that posture. But I think what happens most of the time when people do single arm, I think the Cubans are pretty good with their single arm too, is that like that what they'll do is this arm will go really far forward. They'll throw their arm really far forward and it'll throw their chest forward too. Mm-hmm. And so if you're doing that and or you're coming around crossing like this, it can create a lot of problem. Either you're going to get twisted or you're going to get, you know, really far over rotated. So if you're going to do the single arm, you got to keep it tight and, you know, be a little bit more vertical with it as opposed to just throwing the arm out. And I just don't see there's a lot of good examples of women doing that really well. And so I think single is fine. I think single is going to be a little bit more for people that are elastic. So elastic meaning people getting off the ground really quickly. So like I think Patricia Mamona, who, you know, I've spent actually a lot of time with in Portugal, I think she's a really good example of a great single arm jumper, but she just is like, when they talk about, you know, skipping a rock on water, I think she's like one of the best examples of that. So I think it can be done really well. I think it's really good for elastic people. It's really good for fast people. So yeah, I'm not against it, but I think that there's a way to do it wrong, and I would say most people, in my opinion, are doing it wrong, and there's even some people that jump pretty far that I think are doing it wrong.
So like some common pitfalls of people who are into single arm jumping is like they kind of like lurch forward on that takeoff, and so whenever they're coming down that hop, their chest is like facing down. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, and I think it's because that arm gets too far in front of them. Like there's some people that I think are literally teaching people to like really just like they like punch and their arm just goes straight out. And you do that, your chest is going to follow and you're going to get over rotated.
So you would prefer to see more of like a vertical arm, like?
Yeah, the initial action is vertical and then the arm kind of just is going to relax out. You don't want to like punch it forward.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So going back to the double arm action, you were saying on the hop takeoff, one common pitfall is that big gather is slowing a lot of people down on takeoff. What would you do instead of that to make sure that they're having a quality double arm action and they're not losing a lot of speed at takeoff?
I think Thea's a good example of how you would do it. You do this motion where the arm will come, it'll like freeze kind of in the front, or like it'll kind of like come to your chest and stay here, and then your other arm will meet it and you'll come out. Okay. So like single arm, you would just go like this, right?
Yes.
Double arm, you would go, this arm comes here, freezes, instead of coming back, and then the other arm comes with it. Sometimes some people will freeze this arm behind, and then have the other arm come behind, and then go like that. I think when you start bringing the arm behind like that, your chest drops. And so I don't like that one. So either you come, you freeze this arm, and this arm meets, and you come out, or you do just a single arm takeoff. It's like a takeoff and a half, where the single arm comes here, but the other arm is kind of on the side, and you take off like that. Because it helps you maintain some speed through the board better, as opposed to, again, that gather. Again, you can do it. Like I said, Christian Taylor did it. Christian Olsen, he used to have the world indoor record. he had it, but Christian Olsen, I think, is like 6'7" or 6'6". He's a huge guy, and so
Christian?
Olsen,
Olsen,
Swedish,
Olsen.
Swedish. Christian Taylor, I think, is only like 6'3". Well, not
Yes.
only, but
Only
um,
6'3".
but I'm saying like you can do the little gather, but the gather has to just be an arm gather. You can't let it impact the rest of what your body's doing. Most people that gather are dropping down and getting their chest forward, and again they're trying to like have this huge hop, and it's not going to be good.
So in triple jumping, a lot of people can get caught up in focusing heavily on what they're doing with their arms, whether that be like focusing on punching it forward or like bringing it back. Do you think that's something that people should really be focusing on, or should they have more of an intent to move their legs and be hitting the ground with their legs rather than swinging their arms?
I think it's a good question. I generally think that people should be concerned about their legs. I mean, yes, the arms and the legs are somewhat like reciprocal, or they're gonna what your arms are gonna do is gonna kind of impact what your legs do. So for example, if you try jumping with no arms, like arms like across or something like that on your hips, you're gonna notice how much harder it is to jump. So like the arms are useful, and so the arms do matter, but I think that the most important part of kind of triple jump is making sure that hitting the ground well, so you have active full-footed contact and you have good posture. Like those things have to happen first. And then if you're dealing with like someone who's never ever jumped before, get their arms right immediately. I think it's a lot easier. Let's say somebody was single and they're trying to double. Let's make sure that their single arm contacts are good first, and then we can maybe try to spend the fall to get the double arm together. But it could take some people, months to figure out. You don't want to try that in the middle of the season and you just end up having a bad season. So again, I think really the key focus should be like, let me hit the ground well. And if, for example, like I told you, the arms are, your single arm and you're throwing that arm forward and the posture's wrong, then yeah, you might have to make a correction about the arms and say, hey, you can't throw that arm out there. That arm's going to be a little bit tighter so you can stay upright. Fine. But the idea is about staying upright and hitting the ground well, as opposed to what the arm should be doing.
Okay. So you say like the arms are a supplement to what you're already doing with your posture and hitting the ground with the active full foot contact, like you said. Whenever you're trying to like sort out a triple jumper's technique, would you say that you would address those aspects of posture first and then not really focus on the arms, kind of like letting them do what they're going to do?
That's what I would say. In my experience, that's what I would do. I mean, I think some people pick up the arms really well. Other people, it like destroys their brain for a little bit. And so I don't think it's worth, having people get really frustrated. Again, unless maybe it's like you have a few months. Like let's say that there's like day one of practice or something and you got 3 or 4 months before you even start competing, then maybe you do that. But I really think the key is about posture and foot contact and stuff. And yes, the arms can supplement that. The arms can also, make that harder. And so I think at a minimum you don't want the arms to be a detriment, but I think you can work on them being a supplement after you make sure the posture and the foot contacts are right.
So earlier you said that single arm actions lend themselves more to faster, more elastic jumpers. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think what double arm allows you to do that single arm doesn't is it allows you to create more contact distance. And so what I mean by contact distance is if like you took a freeze frame of when your foot hits the ground and you measured the distance between your foot and kind of like your body, you can basically put your foot out farther when you have double arms because your arms are behind yourself. So you're moving your center of mass behind you, and that means your leg kind of has to stick out forward to counteract those arms being back. And so so when you do that, when you have a longer contact distance, that means that you're going to be on the ground for a longer time. So that means you'll have more time to generate force, which is impulse, and that potentially will allow you to have a bigger phase. At least from a vertical, you have more vertical velocity, so you'll be able to have more time to generate force to get more pop off of that subsequent phase. And so with the single arm, I think you can swing those arms faster than you could for a double arm. And so that means, and because your contact distance is shorter, you're going to spend less time on the ground. And so elastic jumpers are really about like speed preservation and being really efficient with, storing and releasing energy. And, that can be trained a little bit. I would say that's definitely skews more genetic than being, say, like strong. Strong can be genetic too, but like you can really, I think getting stronger is a lot easier than getting elastic, because elastic requires you to, you know, change the structural qualities of your connective tissue, so your tendons and ligaments and stuff. And if you ever torn a ligament or a tendon compared to tearing a muscle, the ligaments take and tendons take way longer than muscles do. And so those changes to modulate, or to change those fibers for connective tissue versus muscle is way longer. And so becoming elastic takes much longer, and it's much harder than becoming, getting bigger muscles and becoming strong.
That was one thing that I talked about with Jake Tura in our last episode, like where tendons have, whereas muscles have weak turnover, where they have a lot of blood flow, they can structurally see a lot of changes in a short amount of time. Tendons take like months and years. So
Yeah,
that probably makes it a lot harder to see like noticeable changes in that elasticity because it's so caught up in that connective tissue, like you were saying.
for sure. Yeah, it definitely takes at least months. At least months. And so again, you can get a lot stronger in a few weeks, but you can't make a lot of changes in your tendons in weeks. It's months, if not years, in the way that we're talking about for this. And that's what I'm saying. You tear your Achilles or something, you're going to be out for a year and a half, probably minimum. When I say out, like back to where you were before.
Going back to another thing you said earlier. So you're talking about earlier how a lot of the problems with high-level jumpers and low-level jumpers are usually the same problems. What are some of the most common issues that you see at all levels in triple jump?
I mean, the number one probably common issue is like getting on the board. Everybody has that problem at all levels. I mean, I definitely think that, yes, as you get to higher levels, people are better at getting onto the board in general, but there are definitely pro people that jump very far that are not good at getting on the board. There are high school kids that I've coached that are better, not because of something I did per se, but like some of it. I think it's a skill, and I think if you're super talented, you can get away with not developing that skill. And so there's, like I said, there's some really, really good jumpers that have not really developed the skill of getting on the board. And you'll see somebody who has a big PR and they'll go to the world championships or something, and then they look like an amateur because they don't know how to get on the board when they only have 3 chances. And everybody's going to beat up on them, if they don't. And so, some of that obviously is pressure, but it's a lot harder to say, hey, I have to be damn near PR and only have 3 chances. That's a lot harder to do than, hey, regardless of what I do, I'm going to make the final and I get 6 jumps, and one of these 6 jumps I'm going to hit. You can't do that at a professional level. But anyway, so I would say getting on the board is definitely a big issue. And I would say, particularly for women, I would say, having a good second phase is another big issue. Yeah, I would say that. I would say one thing that probably is a lot different for professional compared to high school. I think professional people generally are much better sprinters, but as far as actually getting them, I would say they're as particularly that much better. Because I would say that people that might be really good at the board, like think about someone who does gymnastics. So if a kid did gymnastics growing up and they did vault, they usually have really good depth perception at speed. And I think it's just something you have to practice and you have to learn. I would say high school kids, I don't know, it's a mixed bag, but there's some high school kids that are fearless, and there's other high school kids that just think a lot. And so the fearless kids are just going to run, and wherever they hit, they hit. The kids that think too much are going to always foul or always be behind. I would say at the professional level, you have probably more fearlessness, but the accuracy is still not there. So it's a skill. You just need to practice it. I don't think lots of people practice it, but I would also say that I think practicing it is an extremely difficult skill, and it has to be done in the right way. And I think the first goal should be to be a good runner, technically a good sprinter, and have a really disciplined rhythmic run. If you have a disciplined rhythmic run that's pretty consistent, you shouldn't have a lot of trouble getting on the board. Then when you become really, really good, professional or something, then you can actually work on, hey, I'm going to get on the board every single time because that's what I need to do to get this Olympic medal. You can't, everybody's contact. It's the difference between, that 1 centimeter foul and not could be $500,000. And so you can't make that decision.
Yeah.
You can't mess that up.
Yeah, you can't waste away any jumps whenever the stakes are that high. So if you were a jumper that struggled a lot with getting on the board and being inconsistent, how would you go about practicing that?
Yeah, I think again, it's about being disciplined and consistent and rhythmic. So the first thing that you really start with is making sure you have a consistent acceleration or consistent push out the back or power out, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that the first 6 to 8 steps is really where a lot of the variance comes in. And so you should always be practicing, pushing out well with very high intensity with the right level of rhythm. Well, let me not say the right, that's a weird, in the same rhythm. So, if you're pushing a bit, push, 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 like you're always doing that same rhythm with with the same amount of intensity, whatever that is for you. I think that can vary, but I think it's easiest, to create consistency is if you push with all the intensity that you have in the right way, in the right rhythm, you're not going to be that inconsistent later on. So, push for those 6 to 8 steps, transition for another, maybe 4 steps, depends how long your approach is. And then at the end, you should just be upright and you can just run. Again, this is like, can be a really contentious conversation, but it's like steering. So trying to like actually get your foot on the board by like using like visual markers. I think that's important, but I think that's kind of like, that's like expert level thing to do. So worry about that later. If you get your rhythm right and you just keep doing that every time and you're just confident, you just keep going, then you can allow your coach or your friend to just say, hey, oh, you're over, just scoot back a little bit and go again. But if you're doing things like, okay, you pushed out well and then you transitioned and you're looking at the board and then you start doing weird stuff like slowing down or taking big steps or shuffling your steps, then you're never going to get on the board. Or you're going to get, whenever you get on there, it's going to be luck. But if your steps are consistent, there should be very little variation. Obviously, if it's outdoors and there's wind and stuff, that can add an extra kind of variable to things. But I think if you're a disciplined runner, your steps shouldn't differ than more than like a foot. And if you can do that, like you should be fine, especially in triple jump.
For sure. Because that visual component definitely adds like more complexity rather than if you're just focusing like internally.
Yeah, and just another point, like it's just, again, steering is good and I think it can be useful, but I would say that the vast majority of people that just haven't developed the skill, like let's say you didn't have never done gymnastics or something like that or whatever, most people are horrible at it. Most people think that they're on or something and they're like way over or way behind. And so like their gauge is off by like 1 to 2 feet. And so now you have to like beat that out of them.
Yeah.
Like your gauge is totally wrong. You can't trust yourself. And that's really hard to do.
Yeah. Kind of like turning off your brain to what it naturally wants to do.
So you're better off, sorry. So you're better off just running. Just don't even worry about you're better off just running, not worrying about the board than actually trying to do it because your gauge is totally wrong and you can't trust yourself.
Yeah. And it's like whenever you feel like you're on, sometimes you're behind a foot, sometimes you feel like you're over and you're right on. So
Yeah,
it's hard. I mean,
that's the
and
worst.
obviously you can't see your own foot like whenever it hits. Only somebody else can really see that. So you're kind of just guessing.
Yeah, and like one of my biggest pet peeves is like somebody fouling and they're like, "Oh, I thought it was behind," and I'm like, "You just ran, you would have been behind." Like that's the worst. The worst thing you can do is to reach and foul.
Yeah.
First, you shouldn't be reaching one because you're going to lose speed and probably be out of position. But it's like you just totally messed the whole thing up. You thought you were behind, you reached, and then you actually made a foul. If you just ran, you would have been fine. Like that's crazy to me. And then there's maybe, which is even worse, sometimes someone's perfect on the board and like, oh, I thought I fouled, so I didn't finish the jump. And you just like want to pull your hair out.
Yeah, that would be terrible. Just imagine bailing a jump because you thought you were off, but you're on.
But it happens. People do it. So like for me, it's like just run, man. Run and jump, and I'll tell you if you're on or not.
Run and jump. Yeah. So going back to that hop phase and specifically that hop landing going into the second phase, that's like you said, a big pain point for a lot of jumpers. What are some like key points to address in order to get a better second phase and get a better hop landing?
So, I mean, I think that the key is you want to have an active contact, and some people might describe it as kind of like a clawing or like a pawing kind of motion.
Like where you're pulling your foot back into the track, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, I think particularly in high school, what you'll see, I think there's two main issues. One is people generally go too high, and the second issue is that they just kind of stick their foot out and wait for the ground. Like they're reaching or trying to like hold their hop or reaching for the phase or something like that. And So the idea behind being active is like you kind of said, like pulling the ground back. The idea behind that is about pre-tensioning your muscles. So it's like pre-tensioning means that your muscles are actually active, like they're contracted. So when they hit the ground, they don't have to like get the signal, hey, your foot's on the ground and there's a lot of force, so then contract and now try to get off of it. So like you have like very, very limited time. So the idea is that you want your leg like stiff and like ready for the ground before it even hits the ground. And so when you're swinging that down like that, your leg is co-contracted. So your hamstrings are really active because they're pulling back. Your quad is going to be a little bit active too. And so it's just going to automatically be ready when you hit the ground. But to fully maximize that, you also want to make sure that your foot is, I was going to say dorsiflex. I wouldn't say the foot isn't like totally dorsiflex. I would say it's like pretty a neutral foot. So dorsiflex means that like your toes are up. So I don't want you to hit the ground like on your heel. You want to hit the ground. Yeah, your heel probably hits the ground first, but it's like a more of a like flatter rolling kind of action than opposed to like boom, boom.
And
You don't
definitely
want
not
to
on
do
the
that.
toe,
Yeah,
right?
you don't want to do like this. You don't want to do like this. You want to do like that. Okay, and so again, the key is you want to have a good trajectory on your hop. So you don't want to go too high. You want to really project off the board to get your hips as far past the board as you can before you take off. Then when your foot comes around the cycle, you're pulling it down and back aggressively. So I think you do those two things, you'll be in good shape.
What do you mean whenever you say you want to get your hips as far past the board before you take off?
So if you're running and I'm taking off on this leg, you want to get these, like my knuckles are my hips in this example.
Okay.
You want to get your knuckles as far past the board as you can before you take off. You don't want to just like jump off the board immediately. You want to
Mm.
get it past and then push off. And that's going to help you. It's going to help you kind of, you get takeoff distance. So takeoff distance means how far your body is past the takeoff point before you leave the ground. So that's like free distance that you'll get. But what it also does is it stretches your hip and it's going to allow that leg, sorry, it's going to allow this leg to really whip forward in the right way because it has a good stretch on it. And so it's going to be much more natural to have that cycle. And then instead of you having to kind of like really fabricate, oh, I'm going to jump off the board, then I'm going to get my knee up, and then I'm going to bring it around to go. You want to have that lower trajectory because, again, for two reasons. One is you generally don't want to go too high because you go too high, the higher you go, the more force you're going to have to handle. But two, the higher you go, you're trading off horizontal velocity. It's a trade off between horizontal and vertical velocity. And that trade off depends on what kind of capacity you have as an athlete. Like I said, for high school kids, generally speaking, you're not particularly strong, and so you shouldn't be going super high. There might be some kids, let's say a football player, that can go high and like kind of like do this triple jump where they have a big hop, a little middle phase, and then a big last phase, and then maybe they can jump far. Maybe they jump 47 feet like that. Maybe. But maybe if they did triple jump properly, they jump 52 feet. Right. So it's not optimal. But again, like if you look for more like a Cuban style jumper, they go really big on their hop. But those guys and girls bound like crazy. Like so they're super strong and they can get away with that. And I wouldn't say that it's suboptimal for them to do that, but you have to be really strong. I mean, I've seen some simulations and some research that would suggest that going for a big hop is the best thing you can do, but you have to be super duper strong to be able to handle that. Your eccentric strain capacity has to be really, really high. And so that's going to come from years and years of lots of bounding and really a lot of stuff in the weight room. And high school kids just aren't going to have that at that age. But I don't know, maybe not. I mean, there are some high school kids that are in Cuba that are jumping crazy far. So maybe you can do it if you start at a young enough age. But American kids, I haven't seen that.
I was talking to Jonathan Sarem the other day, the NCAA champion, and he was talking about the Cuban jumpers saying like they treat triple jump the way that the Jamaicans treat the sprints. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of oddly specific. Triple jump of all things. But I love it. I mean, I wish that people in America would do that. But going back to what you were talking about with getting your hips past the board, that's something that now I'm realizing I do not do. Like I always kind of like hit it real stiff and then like pop up and the shin doesn't really go over or the knee doesn't go over the board. How do you learn that skill of being able to get the hips past the board? How do you like, are there any drills or different cues to think about?
I mean, I think it's really, yeah, I think there's some drills and some cues. I think it's about you want to, when you take off, you want to get a stretch in like your hip flexor, excuse me. So, push through your big toe, stretch in your hip flexor, punch the knee forward.
Punch
I mean, I
which knee?
think the free leg knee, so the non-hop knee off the board. I think as far as drills, you can do things like, skipping for distance with like a sled, like not something super heavy, but something enough that's going to pull you back. And so, you have to really extend to get some motion, doing something similar to that, but like with a med ball. So like almost like think of like a chest pass with a med ball, but off one foot. Like that's going to really get you really good extension. That's kind of like the position that you want to be off of the board. If you're double arm in particular, a one-footed chest pass is really big extension. But yeah, using a med ball. Yeah, I think those are good drills. Hopping off of a box. So like do like a short approach, and you have a box, and something probably no more than 4 inches high, and jumping off of that. I wouldn't. There's some high school kids that can do it. I mean, it's the reason why I use the box is because you're getting extra height. So the extra height it's gonna do two things. One, it's gonna add an extra eccentric component, so you're higher, so that means you're falling more distance, so the forces are going to be higher, so that's just good training. But it's going to force you to say like, man, I can't go, if I go high off this box, I'm going to die. So like it's going to force you to project out better because you already have the height that you need.
So it's kind of like a constraint, like you were saying, if you pop up too much, like it's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
So it forces you to like go out flatter and get your hips past the board.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And how high of a box would you usually use for that? Like maybe a couple inches or like?
That's what I'm saying. Like no more than like 4 or 5 inches. I mean, the typical like the boxes that you buy from like Gill or something, they're like maybe 5 inches high. I think that's fine, but you could also use like some schools have those, like we call them tops, like those tops that cover the sand pit, those big metal ones. Maybe do like one or two of them. So yeah, I wouldn't do any more than 5 inches. That's like 12 centimeters. You could start out like with lower boxes, for people that are maybe newer. But yeah, no more than 5 inches. Anywhere from 2 to 5 inches. You could even use like you have extra like roll out runway. You could stack a couple of those on top of one another. Sometimes people have those little like rubber tiles and stuff. You can use those.
Nice. So one thing that I've noticed a lot from your Instagram is that you use different combinations of like hop, hop, step drills,
Mm-hmm.
step, different combinations of phases. Do you usually use those to address different like weaknesses in the jumper? Or like, how do you decide which exercise to use for a specific jumper?
Yeah, I definitely do those combo jumps because I think they help reinforce or either reinforce or help you learn how to correct errors that you have in your triple jump. I'll say for Thea, honest to God, I don't think we didn't do one short approach triple jump the Olympic year. Like seriously,
It
we
was all
don't.
just combination jumps?
Yeah, so we don't. She doesn't like doing short approach jumps. Honestly, I don't with my other athletes. I might do them once a month. I think they can be good sometimes to give people kind of confidence and stuff and give them a feel. Some people might lose it. Again, Thea just doesn't like them. I think because what happens when you go from short approach, sometimes you start doing weird stuff that doesn't really apply to a full approach jump, and so it can kind of be fool's gold. So like it can be there's sometimes people will look really good from short approach, and then you go from full approach and it doesn't look good because they'll put their body in positions during short approach that if you do that with more speed and more forces, that it just doesn't work. Or you do things from short approach and the speeds are slower, so it's easier to do. And so it's like you feel like you're really improving, and I guess some ways you are improving your short approach, but that might not translate to the full approach because the speeds and the timing and the forces are different. But anyway, to answer your question about the combo jumps, I think again, people are talking about you're talking about a small middle phase, and I think the reason why people have small middle phases is because they don't do like hop hop step jump. You do hop hop step jump, and you have a bad middle phase. It's going to be very 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 difficult for you to get a second hop off. And so I think doing that drill is really good at making sure that you have a really good hop to step contact. I mean, maybe it sounds a little counterintuitive, like, hey, I'm doing 2 hops and that's going to help my step phase, but it's really about how you're contacting the ground after your hop. And the only way you can get a second hop in is if you're contacting the ground well on your first hop. And so like that's why we do that one in particular a lot. Because again, if you don't do that second hop, then all you're doing is reinforcing a bad step phase. You know what I'm saying? And then I might do, multiple steps because that's going to allow you to, work on your step phase in particular, and then also your step to jump phase. I said step to jump phase, but your step to jump contact. So it's like if you do hop 3 steps in a jump, you're going to get 2 opportunities to do a step phase on the proper foot that you, right? So maybe your first one's bad. I think the way you become a good jumper is you become self-aware, like real time. So if you do one, like, dang, my first step was not good, then you have, another second to figure out how to get the second one better, or at least try something else. And so it allows you to get more reps in real time really quickly. And I also think that, we do those combos on both sides. So, you hop, hop, step, jump off the right leg, we'll do hop, hop, step, jump off the left leg. And we usually start with the weak leg first because it's kind of a warm-up. And, there's a lot of research that comes from, people that get injured and they do stuff on their other leg or their other arm or whatever. And it's called the cross-education effect. These neurological pathways from doing this stuff on the other leg or the other arm that actually transfer to the other side. And so it allows you to get a lot more practice in if you get that other side good too. Your body can only take so many contacts on one side. And so if you can spread it across to the other side, it allows you to get more practice in.
Interesting. So it's kind of like helping you like be able to coordinate it better with like the neurological aspects of it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's a learning a skill, you're physically creating neurons and neurological connections. And so if you do that, on one side of your body, those pathways are also being created on the other side of your body. Not in the same intensity, but it is happening. And so it allows you, having that dexterity on both sides is complementary.
And I guess it kind of reminds me of the box, where it's kind of like a constraint. For the double hop, like you were saying, if you have a bad hop, then you're not going to be able to get the second one off. And the way it feels whenever you do like a hop hop jump is you have to put that foot down or else you're going to like face plant.
Mm-hmm.
So it like reinforces good mechanics without like by adding a constraint into it. Like you have to do 2 hops.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best way to coach. Like, you should try to create drills or environments that kind of incentivize people, or encourage people to do stuff the right way without you having to tell them exactly. And so, as you said, jumping off the box punishes you if you don't do it the right way. You know what I'm saying? Running over like little mini hurdles is telling you to, like, hey, you got to hit the ground a certain way and your thighs got to get to a certain place or you're going to trip over all these hurdles. Right? But I don't have to tell you to do that. Just run and you'll figure it out, right? And so, look, I mean, there's always going to be some level of what's called like, cueing, internal or external cueing. Internal cue would be like, your arm needs to be here, your knee needs to be here. External cue might be like, just, get a big cycle. Like, you're still gonna have to do some of that stuff, but the more you can kind of create an environment where people kind of have to do it and figure it out, I think it's better. I think of like, doing triple jump is a skill. It's not just about the physical attributes of it, right? And so it's like if you were a gymnast and you had to learn how to do a flip, I can't just say, hey, just do a flip. You do that, you're going to land on your head and not be able to flip ever again, right? So I say that to say that, like, we should treat triple jump in that way too, where it's like you're not just running and jumping, like you got to do it a certain way. And so we don't treat other technical sports like that. The only reason we treat gymnastics like that in particular is because there's a huge penalty if you do it wrong.
Yeah. And it's just like, I guess a good example would be high jump. Like you could have a guy with a 40-inch vertical off of one, but he can't do high jump to save his life because there's a skill aspect to it.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, certainly there are some basketball guys that can kind of pop in and jump well, but I think, there's one maybe famous example of somebody doing that and winning a world championship, but that's extremely rare. I'm blanking on his name. He still jumps. He's from Bahamas. He's
Yes.
about, I can see his face. I just can't remember his name right now. But to be fair,
Yeah,
he did improve a month after that.
I wanted to say Donald Scott, but that's not his name. He's a triple jumper.
No, it's not Donald Scott.
No.
It's Donald Thomas.
That's what it is, Donald Thomas. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember he came out and he was jumping in like running shoes, not even spikes. Insane. So we do have to wrap up in just a little bit here. So I wanted to finish off with one last question. So a lot of our athletes, a lot of our audience is high school jumpers. Many of them don't really have a coach and they don't know where to start. They don't know where to look like for information. So if you were a high school jumper in their situation, where would you look first for help and what would you do to help improve your triple jump?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think, I'll take some responsibility. I think I used to post a lot more stuff that was like helpful. I've been more busy recently, so obviously, like my page, I think if you really go through my page, I think there's some good stuff in there. You might have to dig a little deep. I just haven't been posting that stuff as much as I used to. But I'm trying to think. Honestly, I feel like there's not a lot of great resources on triple jump. I mean, there's guys like you that I think are posting some good content. Honestly, I think the best way to do it, at least from a technical standpoint, if you're a high school kid, I think what you should do is go look at, go on YouTube and look at all the best jumpers and try to find out similarities of what they're doing. So like, all of them look like, maybe you don't know what the stuff is called or whatever, but you're like, all of them are really hitting the ground hard, or all of them are really swinging their legs hard, and all of them are really tall, or all of them are running really like with their knees high and whatever. And you find all of these similarities, and then you look at your video and you're like, man, I'm not doing any of that stuff. And then you start trying to like replicate that stuff. There are different styles of jumps, and not every style is the right person for everybody, or right. Not every style is the right for every person or whatever. But like, I think if you look at all of the similarities and kind of compare that to kind of what you're doing, that's like a good starting point for what at least you need to look like. As far again as like actual getting technical information about what you should do, I think that's the tougher one. I mean, YouTube has some stuff. I know there's like, I think John Shepard has a lot of stuff on YouTube.
He's a good one.
I think he can be a good resource. I'm trying to think of like free stuff that's out there.
John Shepard is good. We're trying our best to provide as much information as possible. I mean, but as far as horizontal jumps go, you just got to go digging. Feels like.
Yeah, there might be some good stuff from Boo Schnecksnyder. He's a coach at LSU a while ago. I don't know if kids are really good at researching stuff, but he has some free stuff online. You have to read. It's not on TikTok.
Yes. And if you're on our Discord, if you're not, go to the description and join. We do have a video series from Boo Schnecksnyder that y'all have access to and you can watch. It's on the triple jump and all the things talking about the technique. So yeah. Anything else you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, I mean, I'll say this. I think triple jump, I love jumping in particular. I think it's really fun. But I think triple jump in particular is really hard. And so like, it's going to take a while for you to get to where you want to be. And so, keep working at it and, don't get discouraged just because something doesn't work. Sometimes stuff, you might take a year for you to figure out. But then once you figure it out, you're going to have a big breakthrough. But most of the stuff in the triple jump takes a while.
Yeah.
And so just don't forget that as you're trying to figure some things out. I think in high school, you can get a lot of improvement just because everything's so new and you're getting into shape and you're still physically and mentally growing. But once that goes away, you're going to have to really actually make some technical changes, and that stuff takes some time.
And everybody faces plateaus and struggles. I mean, even Christian Taylor in our interview with him, he was talking about how he faced plateaus. But one thing his coach told him was, whenever you're at a plateau and it feels like you're jumping the same thing, something big is probably around the corner. So that's something to hold on to and just keep going, keep hope, and keep working. If you got value from this interview, make sure to hit subscribe and join our new Jumpers University elite community. We built it for serious jumpers who want to go deeper and improve their skills. Detailed breakdowns, exclusive content, and direct access to us. If you want to level up your game, then this is where you need to be. Click the link in the description to join, and we'll see you inside. Big thank you to Aaron Gadson, and congratulations to Thea LaFond on an incredible season.